Uh, Good evening. Welcome to Supernatural Fiction. This is our fifth lesson on doubles and revenants. I'm going to start off with some quotations from literary favorites. This is Henry James. To live over other people's lives is nothing unless we live over their perceptions, live over their growth, the varying intensity of the same, since it is by these they themselves lived. We forfeit three-fourths of ourselves in order to be like other people. The world of the living contains enough marvels and mysteries as it is, marvels and mysteries acting upon our emotions and intelligence in ways so inexplicable that it would almost justify the conception of life as an enchanted state. That's Joseph Conrad. We are going to be discussing the divided self, split personalities, and a whole bunch of vocabulary terms which cover the double and those beings that come back to life again, which are the revenants. The double is, this is the Oxford English Dictionary, the apparition of a living person, a wraith, a fetch, also known as a doppelganger. The fetch or double of a Göttingen student, R.A. Proctor. The appearance of a double or a fetch has ever been held to signify approaching death. Just want to asterisk that connection. Malcolm Lowry. It may well be that you will observe my little doppelganger poltergeist soul hoisting a drink in a bar in them parts. The German doppelganger, or Dutch doppelganger, double goer, so double goer is another term for the same, is the apparition of a living person, a double, a wraith. So we do have a lot of repetition here. Dualism, the condition or state of being dual or consisting of two parts, twofold. Division, duality. An inevitable dualism bisects nature, so that each thing is a half and suggests another thing to make it whole. A whole bunch of other terms which relate. Wraith, swarth, double man, teish, fetch, double goer, doppelganger, fetch like, doppelganger, ghost, soul, and foil. Foil is two sides of the same personality, and I'm sure you've come across this in any Shakespeare studies that you've done. A sheet of the same in modern use, an amalgam of a tin and quicksilver placed behind the glass of a mirror to produce a reflection. From Ben Jonson, I now begin to see my vanity shine in this glass reflected by the foil. And the isinglass, having a foil of quicksilver and pewter put behind it, looks like a looking glass. That's from someone named John Bargrave in 1680. So, a history of the double after having all the words and the concepts which relate to that term. This is from The Shadow Within, the Conscious and Unconscious Use of the Double, Claire Rosenfeld. To the sophisticated audience of the classical world, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, doubles were either facsimiles, bodily duplicates manipulated to divert us, or allegorized opposites to instruct us. Perhaps not until after the development of the novel have we been made aware of what primitivists have always intuitively known, that duality inspires both terror and awe, whether that duality be manifest in a twin birth, or in a man and his shadow, or in one's reflection in water or in a mirror, or in the creation of an artifact resembling the exterior self. Not until Freud revealed the importance of the irrational in man have we been willing to admit the possibility that each of us has within us a second, or a shadow self, dwelling besides the eminently civilized, eminently rational self, a double who may at any time assert its anti-social tendencies by analyzing superstitions, folk beliefs, and modern literature. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a perfect example of this, and that is the illustration from, I think, the original book cover is on the lesson this week. These complementary doubles may appear in the narrative as simple opposites. What is important is not their contrary natures and description, but the way in which they reveal the loss of identity of the main character. And that's always the anxiety, is that this second self is going to consume the more upright self. And they are going to lose, or that original person is going to lose his or her identity. And that happens with the Revenants as well. Not only did the Romantic movement sanction introspection, it also reintroduced into society the collective inheritance of the folk. As I've already noted, the doppelganger was made initially respectable in romance, fairy tale, and a mystery story, where repressed fantasies asserted themselves with particular vengeance and extravagant plots. Some examples. The one representing the socially acceptable or conventional personality, the other externalizing the free, uninhibited, often criminal self. So that would be Joseph Conrad, who we heard from for a moment at the beginning, The Secret Sharer, Mann's Dr. Faustus, Dostoevsky's The Double, all reveal this pattern. Or he may present two characters who complement each other both physically and psychologically, and who together are projections of the crippled or struggling personality of a third character with whom the author is primarily concerned. And this would include Dostoevsky, who in His Crime and Punishment, and Melville's Pierre. These complementary doubles may appear in the narrative as simple opposites. What is important is not their contrary natures and descriptions, by the way in which they reveal the loss of identity of the main character. When the passionate, uninhibited self is a woman, she more often than not is dark and the sister or half-sister of the protagonist, thus introducing the suggestion of incest, the most horrific crimes in Christian culture. So that's pretty heavy stuff from the Romantics and Gothic literature, and from Goethe to Dostoevsky to Conrad. Dostoevsky, in a work called The Raw Youth, asked this question: what is the second self exactly? The second self, according to a medieval book written by an expert, is nothing else than the first stage of serious mental derangement, which may lead to something very bad. And in the scene at my mother's, Versolov himself had with a strange frankness described the duality of his will and feelings. But I repeat again, that scene at mother's and the broken icon were undoubtedly partly due to the influence of a real second self. So Dostoevsky puts that splitting in the psychological realm as the first signs of mental illness. In Conrad, we have that the reader, and that even the most rational man possesses a dual nature, that no man is above the threat of the irrational. And that would be very Freudian. Double novels become devil novels in a social context, which places a negative value upon what is free and uninhibited. Freud states that psychologically, the devil is simply the projection into the external world of man's buried instinctual life. But Hebraic Christian mythology, not Freud, assigned the pejorative word evil to that projection. Primitive religions made no distinction between gods and devils. The gods were both worshipped and feared. According to Otto Rank, the original double, when it was insurance against the destruction of the self, was a guardian angel. Later, it appears as precisely the opposite, a reminder of the individual's mortality, indeed the announcer of death itself. The church, which used to believe in the immortality used belief as in immortality as a means of distributing rewards and punishments, created the devil as we know him today in the destructive concept of the double. So definitely some controversial statements there. I think the thing to remember is just how old, how ancient these ideas are of a dual nature. You have in your lesson quite a bit on Freud, so I'm just going to gloss over him for a moment since there's more to read. And you may by now know the uncanny backwards and forwards, his work from 1899. So just a little bit. The idea of the double, the doppelganger, and all its nuances and manifestations, that is to say, the appearance of person who has to be regarded as identical because they look alike. This relationship is intensified by the spontaneous transmission of mental processes from one of these persons to the other, what we would call telepathy, so that the one becomes the co-owner of the other's knowledge, emotions, and experiences. And I asked all of you last week what you thought of this, whether there's any reality to a kind of mind reading. And here Freud is saying that we have a fear of our minds being read. And this is a feature of the double, is that there is this person out there who could do that. And then with a revenant, that there's a invader, there's some kind of spirit which is able to take over our minds. Moreover, a person may identify himself with another and so become unsure of his true self, or he may substitute the other self for his own. The self may thus be duplicated, divided, and interchanged. Finally, there is a constant reoccurrence of the same thing, the repetition of the same facial features, the same characters, the same destinies, the same misdeed, even the same names through successive generations. And Dostoevsky really illustrates this in his short novel, The Double, which I recommend. The motif of the double has been treated in detail by Otto Rank. This work explores the connection of the link, the double. It links the double with mirror images, shadows, guardian spirits, the doctrine of the soul, and the fear of death. It also throws a good deal of light on the surprising evolution of the motif itself. The double was originally an insurance against the extinction of the self, or as Rank put it, an energetic denial of the power of death, and it seems likely that the immortal soul was the first double of the body. The invention of such doubling as defense against annihilation has a counterpart in the language of dreams, which is fond of expressing the idea of castration, and duplicating or multiplying. I'll skip that. In the civilization of ancient Egypt, it became a spur to artists to form images of the dead in durable materials. But these ideas arose on the soil of boundless self-love, the primordial narcissism that dominates the mental life of both the child and primitive man. And when the phase is surmounted, the meaning of the double changes. Having once been an assurance of immortality, it becomes the uncanny harbinger of death. I hope you all use that principle in your stories and answers this week. However, after considering the manifest motivation behind the figure of the double, we have to own that none of this helps us understand the extraordinary degree of uncanniness that attaches to it, and we may add, drawing upon our knowledge of pathological mental processes, that none of this content could explain the defensive urge that ejects it from the ego as something alien. I will stop there with Freud and just let you ponder that. If you have idea of why we find doubles so uncanny, I'd love to hear what you think. Otto Rank, in a lecture in 1938, said life itself is a mere succession of separations, beginning with birth, going through several weaning periods, and the development of the individual personality, and finally culminating at death, which represents the final separation. At birth, the individual experiences the first shock of separation, which throughout his life he strives to overcome. In the process of adaptation, man persistently separates from his old self, or at least from those segments of his old self that are now outlived. Like a child who's outgrown a toy, he discards the old parts of himself for which he has no further use. The ego continually breaks away from its worn-out parts, which were of value in the past, but of no value in the present. The neurotic, who cannot unlearn and therefore lacks creativity, is unable to accomplish this normal detachment process owing to fear and guilt generated in the assertion of his own autonomy. He's unable to free himself and instead remains suspended on some primitive level of his evolution. So if we take life as a series of separations, when they are not successful, then we start having these kind of wrongful multiplicities. So your reading for this week might look daunting, but just choose the stories that are of interest to you. Revenant as Typewriter, I'd like to really encourage you to read that, and The Jolly Corner by Henry James, and The Loves of Lady Purple by Angela Carter, just about a marionette. The Poor Girl by Elizabeth Taylor. The Honeysuckle Cottage is P.G. Wodehouse. He's usually a humorous writer, so a little surprising that he's venturing into the ghost story, but Revenants can be funny. I think you may find Revenant as Typewriter funny too. Markheim, Robert Louis Stevenson, I think I'll have in the resources for you, so that's if you want to listen to a Markheim rendition. And Wakefield is the replacement for Markheim, Nathaniel Hawthorne, a story which has been with us now for several hundred years, just about. So enjoy the reading, and I look forward to your stories. Thank you.